All right, hi everyone. People are joining. This is so exciting. Awesome. Okay, we're gonna give everyone like 2 minutes just to hop on, and then we're gonna get started very quickly. So I hope everyone is having a great start to their day, and we're very appreciative for you all joining us. This is very exciting. It's our first webinar, and we are very excited to have you guys. All right, let's just jump into it as everyone is joining. So hello all, good afternoon everyone, and welcome. You're all here for Trusted by the Algorithm, a conversation about what happens to customer experience when AI is the first thing standing between your brand and your customer. I'm Samantha Pochia, I'll be your host today, and I'll be bringing you your questions later in the session, so start dropping them in the Q&A panel whenever something sparks. We'll get to as many as we can. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. We will be recording, so you'll get this afterwards for the live replay. Drop questions in the Q&A box so we don't lose them, and we'll hold all questions for the back half so our speakers can get through their ideas first. Now, the people you came for. Shiv Gupta is Volute Group's Chief Solutions Officer and the author of the white paper this session is built on, and Aaron Tellier is our Chief Marketing Officer, and he spent his career working on the kind of problem we're talking about today. Together, they're going to unpack what it actually means to be trusted by the algorithm and what your brand has to do to earn it. Shiv, Aaron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sam. Before we kick off this discussion, I think it'd be very helpful to start with a story. This is a true story about my own experience. I was recently, earlier this year, looking for a new travel credit card. It's because I felt like I was going to be traveling a bit more this year, and I thought that would be helpful. So I went to my bank, a bank I've had a relationship with for over a decade. And I talked to the banker who I'd actually had a personal relationship for many years as well. And she introduced me to their flagship card, talked about the rich benefits. It did come with a heavy price tag, but the estimate was that it would return more in value than the cost. And I appreciated the conversation. And for me, it just still didn't sit right. So I went home and I asked my AI advisor, I said, is this the right card for me? What others would you recommend? And the AI advisor took into account my travel history, how I redeem, how I tend to buy and make spending decisions. And it came up with an alternative card. It said, this is really the better card for you because this fits your buying behavior, your redemption patterns, and it will be a greater value for you. And I want that to sit for a minute. Here was a relationship I had with a bank over multiple decades and a personal relationship with the banker. Yet within 1 minute, my AI advisor had interceded into that relationship and actually defined a better product for me that did fit my needs better and was able to convince me that that's the card for me. This story, I think, is illustrative of the real power that AI advisors now have in the purchasing process. And I'd like this to be one of those stories that you think about as we go through subsequent slides. So what are we here to talk about? Well, based on just that story itself, we believe there's a huge opportunity in the market to start to talk about how we market through agentic advisors. And at Volute, we have a product called Agentic IQ, and we won't go through that product today. But the premise of that product, I think, is very important to understand because it is the premise through which we'll be having a discussion today. And that is that your next competitor may not beat you with a bigger or better campaign. They may beat you because an AI agent trusts them more. And the question comes up, well, how do we then build brands and make them more powerful and consistent in terms of trust signals? And the word trust signals is something I want you to also keep in mind as we go through our discussion today, because I believe this is the new currency through which marketers, or any important new currency, which marketers need to keep in mind going forward. So if you're in this webinar, you've probably already drunk the Kool-Aid in terms of the power of AI-assisted buying or agentic buying. And I recognize that AI-assisted buying and agentic buying are defined differently, but for the purposes of this conversation today, we'll treat them as the same. So AI-assisted buying is actually becoming very, very powerful. and very common in terms of practice. The numbers in the financial industry indicate something in the range of 40 to 50% of users use AI assisted buying to help them make better financial product decisions and make better investing decisions. These numbers are pretty much the same, maybe slightly higher when it comes to healthcare. One note here, 60% of consumers trust AI to make recommendations around doctors, specialists, and other providers. A significant majority of shoppers for health plans also use AI to help them understand their health plans better and to understand the choices they have in health plans. Just recently, I finished a conversation with a podcaster on who specializes in retail, and the numbers for retail are even higher. So this is not a trend that is affecting just one industry, but fairly broad, and something that I think every marketer needs to be aware of and needs to address. So what are we talking about here? What is this change? What is this large shift? The shift is actually a shift from persuasion to selection. Agentic buying translates the mechanics of decision-making itself. The battleground that we're talking about here is a shift from the consumer's mind to the algorithm's model, and that shift is significant and speaks a different language. Let's take a look at what that means from a more practical perspective. So you have AI agents that become part of that decision layer. They are the intercedents in a purchase process. That AI agent is asked to discover options, compare prices, evaluate providers of products, and make recommendations. What that really implies underneath, though, is that the nature of how you compete as a brand is changing. Historically, whereas a brand would compete for attention, recall, persuasion, being top of mind, and consideration, that's now changing, and brands now need to start to compete for inclusion, recommendation, and algorithmic trust. These are different metrics, and these are different ways in which how you present those metrics. The experience signals that drive recommendation confidence that an AI will infer trustworthiness from can come from multiple places. It could be your customer experience. It could be information it learns about issue resolution. It evaluates your pricing message and tries to understand whether that pricing is clear or not. It also evaluates unresolved complaints and whether there's a pattern to your unresolved complaints. There are multiple pieces of information it will evaluate. But the larger story here is in the age of agentic buying, brands are increasingly defined by what AI systems can verify about the brand and not just what marketing claims about its brand. So what does this mean? This is not the next generation of search. While AEO and GEO, which is arguably the next generation of search, is very, very important in this process, it is important but not sufficient to be recommended by an AI engine. There are two other areas that you need to think about when trying to get in front of a customer through an AI advisor. One is the strong external trust signals. So yes, this is about reviews. This is about any sort of independent validation. It's also about analysts and media mentions. It's also about regulatory compliance and records. So if, for example, you're a financial services company, if there's a regulatory case against you, potentially something around pricing or upselling aggressively, those things all now start to factor into how AI perceives your level of service. It's also looking for signal consistency. So it's not just about what you say about your brand and how you say it through AEO and GEO, but also those trust signals, and are those consistent? Are you living up to the promises you are making to the market? I think let's unpack this a little bit more, because to truly understand the opportunity that's in front of you as marketers, it's important to understand how AI is making this decision. So bear with me as I go through a process that is a bit labored, but I will break it down in 3 stages, and I think it'll become very clear as to what's really happening when an AI engine is recommending you. So yes, you have signal generation. You have the optimized content that AEO and GEO is designed to create. You have claims, certifications, rewards, ratings and reviews that you have that are controlled inside your property. So these are your owned properties, and there's a lot of information about your brand and your services there. There's also going to be externally generated signals. These are forums, news articles, regulatory actions, government reports, customer reviews, customer narratives that you may find, and those are going to be important pieces of information as well. So as a prospect then engages AI to better understand whether your product might be something that's appropriate for them, the AI agent is actually running a probabilistic inference. What it's trying to do on one side of it is understand what the buyer's needs are, and then match that information, that signal generation information, and attempt to probabilistically measure the dimensions that it thinks is going to be important for you. So whether that's reliability, transparency, responsiveness, fairness, customer impact, your ability to resolve problems quickly, whatever those dimensions are, it's going to make assessments and have a probabilistic model associated with that. Then it's going to go through a process of signal reconciliation. So it's going to look at what your declared promises are. What does your brand communicate and claim that it does exceptionally well, and for who? And then it's going to look at the inferred operational reality. Based on what it sees, what is the evidence that you actually are able to live up to those promises? Is it consistent or inconsistent with what you say? And then that consistency assessment is going to be very important, because if it's highly aligned, meaning that your brand promises are actually corroborated by the vast majority of information it's able to gather about you, there's a high level of alignment, strong consistency between claims and evidence. That could be moderate, or it could also be high levels of contradiction in that your brand's claims do not live up to the realities of how it's actually experienced in the market. The big takeaway here is that this is essentially a probabilistic model. And what it's asking itself is, will this brand or product, what brand or product has the greatest probability of meeting a consumer's needs? And if you're inconsistent, or the levels of inconsistency are rather high, that probability drops. And as consumers, we could probably understand that, right? Even though a AI model is running a mathematical equation on the back end of this, at the front end, we know that when you're inconsistent, no matter what that relationship is, trust drops. And the ability for you to estimate a probability of having a successful interaction reduces. And so AI is doing nothing different. But what it is doing is it's looking for data to help it make that probability calculation. And the more information it has, the more likely it is to recommend you.
Thanks, Shiv. I've enjoyed having this conversation with you for a while now. We've been talking about how AI is changing everything, and it doesn't seem like I can get into any conversation without AI being a part of it. And so, Shiv, when you wrote the white paper and we started talking about this, it resonated with me. But the more that I have dug into this, the more I have seen this to be an absolute reality, and the disconnect that appears in the marketplace when brands don't realize that experience now matters more than ever. You can't just go out and say things and have it to be true, because you've got this fantastic new world of AI, which is constantly refreshing and looking at all of these signals to deliver the best information it can to the users. And everybody's trying to win that AI race, and the more that it can probabilistically provide you the right solution, the more likely that particular AI is going to win in the marketplace. So I can say that it matters more than ever, and it sounds a little bit like a throwaway statement, but I'm going to give you a real life example here about how my intuition matches the reality of what's happening. So it was about a month and a half ago, a major bank just announced that they have a new positioning a whole press release about how they were going to do things better, and it was all about the taglines. And so I just gotta I'm gonna read from you the press release. So it says here, and literally it says, the positioning is designed to meet today's challenges. Okay, maybe the experience should be designed to meet, but okay, fine. The positioning is designed to meet today's challenges with a refreshed brand platform, a new identity system, and a wittier tone. Nice job, guys. That's all fun and good. And how are they going to make this a reality? They tell us they're going to put it out in TV, streaming, out of home, and social media. So they're going to blanket the world with their new positioning statement. So, how did this brand hold up when I put it into my favorite AI solution? And I'm just going to read that to you. Mixed picture. And the gap between sources matters here. The institutional reviews, Yahoo Finance, Fortune, NerdWallet style coverage consistently praise this particular bank for all the good things that they do. And we all know that these things are pay to play. I've been in this industry, and if you're going to be in these kind of press, so they're paying to have a good reputation. But here's the next sentence: the crowdsourced complaint sites tell a much harsher story. Um, Trustpilot, Consumer Affairs, and a Wallet Hub show very low average ratings with recurring complaints about X, Y, and Z. So there you go. It's playing out exactly in reality. You've got institutions thinking that they can just go out and say things, and honestly, it makes me laugh that they would do a press release, about that, as opposed to a press release about some improvement that they have made. So what we're trying to say here is that the brand experience plus the customer experience puts out signals that AI can evaluate. And you just saw that. You saw the institutional and the kind of pay to play, and then you saw the real life examples of reviews and feedback. And so all of this stuff is getting processed by AI, and we're not controlling that. As marketers and as brands, we can't control that. And think about things like even pricing clarity. If you're out in the marketplace with confusing pricing, how is AI going to look at that and create a probabilistic response to the user when it itself has to reconcile those discrepancies? So consistency is much more important here than ever, and that's what's going to give you these buying recommendations. So, you go to the next slide. Thanks. So, the idea is that brands can no longer claim trust into existence. And I'm sorry, I have a lot of stories, but I was recently in Belize, and we were driving down the road in one of Ambergris Cay in Belize, and there were sign after sign after sign for this one restaurant slash bar, and they were very witty and they were very funny. And I mean, I must have saw 50 signs, and we were driving down the road, and we didn't have to be anywhere at a specific time. So we thought, man, we gotta go here because it seems like it'll be fun. And they were kind of implying that yes, it was a good time to be had. Well, we got there, and it was, I don't know, 6:30, 7 o'clock for a bar slash restaurant should be hopping. Nobody was there. It was so dead. And then when we went up to the bar, the bartender he was all right, but it was no special. He wasn't telling jokes. He didn't match my expectations that were created by the advertising that I saw. And so we had a drink, kinda downed it, and left. And then we were all like, "Well, that kinda sucks." And we thought, funny advertising, but we're definitely not going there again. And I'm not this sort of person, but there are the sort of people out there who would write a review. about that and go, if you ever visit this place in Belize, the advertising is funny, but you can skip the actual experience because it's nothing special. And so it's just a yet another example of how when your brand promise and the brand expectations don't match the experience, you get what we've coined here is the reverse flywheel. So perfect example, the overstated promises. You're going to have a great time. Things are happening at this. No, nothing's happening. So the experience falls short. Like I said, I didn't leave a review, but I can certainly imagine that people have left reviews. So what's AI gonna do about that? It's gonna see these reviews, and if you're a new visitor to this area and you go, "Give me the top places to go," you think it's gonna recommend this particular venue? I don't think so. And so we get into lower trust, lower recommendations, and the whole thing just kind of is a downward spiral. So it's not only a cautionary and kind of humorous tale when these things then when the expectation does not meet the experience, but has a practical negative application. Next slide, please. So, how do we make this better? And we're going to spend some time on customer experience, but let's start with some of the tactical ways that this really matters. You want to, in your communications, think about it from the human side. How are humans going to receive what we are putting out as a brand into the marketplace, as well as how is AI going to receive this? And if we can strike a nice balance between those, then we're going to win if the experience can live up to it. And the more that advanced the AI becomes, what's happening is, and I expect you're experiencing this for yourself, the AI starts to know you, right? It starts to understand some things about your preferences and your history, and that 100% impacts how AI responds to you. And so the segment component of this is really important because those segments are living within AI. We can't access them, but they're absolutely living there. And so when AI is looking for that probabilistic match of your, particular personality with the brand personality that it can intuit by all the signals that it's receiving, those things match up. So segmentation actually is even more important than it ever has been. Probably more complicated as well. But how do we put these signals in the market? And I want to give you some really concrete examples on how to apply this for your own business. These are the kind of slogans that get put out in press releases. We put customers first. Well, good for you, but what's the proof point in that? Well, we have a dedicated service team that's maybe onshore, and that was one of the complaints about this bank. They had recently moved to offshore, and people were having a lot of trouble with that experience. We have transparent fees. That's the pricing structure component, and 24-hour response targets. That's specific. That's actionable. That's human centered and it's AI centered. Both audiences can understand what that means. Let's keep going. Personalized solutions for everyone. Okay, that sounds nice on the surface, but what does that really mean? Retirement planning for physicians. Okay, so it knows the audience, or we're saying who the audience is specifically, facing practice transition. So now we have a context for that. We've narrowed down it, and complex tax needs. So much easier to kind of pair those together than personalized solutions for who? For what? I don't know. But this is much more transparent and much clearer here. And then lastly, we'll beat this horse, a trusted partner for your future. Now, I'm sure no brands are using those kinds of phrases. Uh, yes, they are. But what would be a stronger positioning? Fiduciary, that has a big implication, advice. Published fees, that's transparency demonstrated, quarterly reviews, and documented planning assumptions. So it just takes everything to the next level, and we just be can't be the fancy marketers. We can't be the lazy marketers. And I'm not saying that we're fancy or lazy as marketers. We work really hard, but understanding how to turn what we say and those ideas that we have into actionable things that both humans and the AI can represent are going to pay a big difference. So, we've got some we've learned a few things. We know that we've got to adapt. So how should we adapt? Well, we're gonna go through 6 ways that we can adapt. And the first one is my absolute favorite. Align promises to operational reality. So I'm gonna say this another way. We don't we don't believe our own lies. Or we at least we try to validate what it is that we say. And there's a great story that I first heard from Simon Sinek, a little clip from him when he told about Alan Mulally, who was the CEO of Ford. I think it was 2006. On his first day to work, he shows up in a Lexus. Now, Lexus, if you didn't know, isn't a Ford brand. Uh, and so everyone was like, what is happening right now? The CEO of our company isn't driving our car. And when he got pushback for this, obviously, they're very proud of their historic brand. He said, look, I drove this car and I found it to be the best car that I could drive. And what do you know about this brand? How are you going to keep up with competition if you don't even know what the other brands are doing? And so then he bought a whole fleet of competitive cars, and he made his executives drive them so they understood. And it's not a popular thing to say, but look, a lot of times you get groupthink in organizations. It's not on purpose. It just happens. You're proud of the brand. You're proud of your team. You're proud of the work that you do. And if you close yourself off to the perspective of really what's happening, then you're going to be missing it. And so this may sound a little self-serving, but this is exactly where consultants can be really valuable, especially if you find the right consultant who's going to give you the honest truth. You've got to really look at your brand in a very honest way in order to understand, is there a disconnect here? So that's number one. Number 2 is actually engineering those strong trust signals. So what you put out into market, it absolutely positively has to be aligned to the experiences. So if you're going to talk about your great customer service, you got to deal with the reality that people are in your offshore call center in endless mazes of the IVR, and people who haven't been potentially well trained, or short tenure, who don't have experience with the brand, and how that's actually going to resonate. But if you do have a call center with tenure, now that's something you can say, right? That's a tangible thing that appeals to humans, and it's going to be specific to the AI. So make sure that you're monitoring the environment for all the signals that are out there, and then amplifying those signals by putting them on your website, customer reviews, all that sort of thing, which I think small businesses are really good at, and maybe enterprise customers, aren't so good because they're relying on that brand. And then, 3 is like the hard work here. Reduce the negative signal generation at the source, meaning take number 1, understand what those gaps are in terms of the expectations you want to create and the reality that is your customer service. And you've got to do that at the source. And here's the hard thing about that. It requires multidisciplinary interaction. Sales and marketing and product and customer service and everybody else who has an opinion and an influence on the customer have to be involved in those conversations, because it's often not one department that's causing that disconnect. It's often the disconnect that happens across departments. So this is the hard work, but it's absolutely essential for you to reduce these disconnects at the source.
Thanks, Aaron. I love your stories, by the way. They're always, just they bring that concept to life pretty effectively. And as Aaron points out to the first 3 activities, they're very important. They help set the direction and the strategic clarity of what you want to look like in the market when an AI agent is involved. You have to recognize that this is just not a one-time shot. You need to develop an infrastructure. And remember that what I said earlier, trust signals are a new important currency in marketing. Well, there has to be an infrastructure allowing you to manage and optimize those trust signals. And that's what 4 through 6 are really about. So, one is you need to build an external signal intelligence. If you've defined what signals you need to be known for in the market, you've actually decided that customer service, or for example, easy, simple products to purchase, whatever that trust signal is you're trying to establish, you need to make sure that you're measuring those trust signals in the outside uh, uh, sphere, those unowned channels. So, a measurement program that understands how to measure and capture signals is very important. Next is the signal consistency across channels. Again, if you go back to that deconstruction of the overall model of approach and how AI makes recommendations and how it thinks about probability, one of the most important parts of that process is consistency. So if it hears one trust signal and another, and they don't necessarily match up, furthermore, it hears issues around some of those trust signals as being not necessarily delivered in the best way, then it's now having a consistency problem. So the more you can be consistent about those trust signals you want to generate, that will help you show up in front of AI a lot more effectively. And then think about trust signals as a measurable and manageable asset. So much like you've thought about click-throughs or whatever other marketing metrics we're thinking about, conversion rates, trust signals now need to enter that same sphere of important KPIs of currency. And that means you're not only going to put the trust signals out there, but you're going to measure them. You're going to optimize to them. You're going to identify which trust signals seem to be giving you better lead generation. What trust signals are actually bringing in the wrong customer? That could be happening as well. So developing a measurement infrastructure underneath these trust signals is also a very, very important step, because this is not something you're going to do one time. This is something you're going to be managing and optimizing to over multiple iterations. So Aaron, if you could talk a little bit more about what marketing must deliver.
Yeah, let's break it down here. And this is really more of a tangible reflection of the strategy that you laid out up front, those three components of what needs to be done. We've been talking about how this is more holistic than a lot of people are thinking about AI today, who are focused on AEO and GEO, but no, the AEO and GEO are absolutely critical to this process. I'm going to use Shiv's words. They're just not sufficient to get to the outcomes that we're looking for and to effectively compete in today's and the future marketplace. So you've got to figure out how to work with AEO and GEO. You have to be monitoring those. You have to have FAQ, structured content. You've got to be specific. We talked about how to be more, take those generic phrases and be more specific so that they can be something that the AEO and GEO layer can grab onto. So there's a ton of work that happens there. I don't want to minimize that effort, but it's not sufficient. And so when you look across your own media, your earned media, your unowned media, and your paid media, each of these has a different set of activities and components that you need to be thinking about. So, we've talked a little bit about how the website needs to be structured in a way with FAQs and thought leadership and specific words. This isn't about keywords. It's about, because we've passed the keyword world now. That there still is some of that, but we're into the idea world. We've gone beyond this idea of keywords, and so we can use more complex ways in our owned media to communicate these, as long as they are specific. They do include proof points, they do include outcomes, and they're structured in the right way. So that's our owned media. And then in our earned media, we have to be very careful about what we put out and how the press picks those things up. And we should be thinking about how might the press respond, or other analysts, or how might this be talked about on a podcast or a webinar. What we've been saying, about our brand, the awards, rankings, and citations, these are all important, but here's the key. You can't just pay for somebody to say that that's what they did by passing some exam, which theoretically should give you that credibility, but it actually doesn't. So you've got to have real third-party credibility, and that can be hard to distinguish because that's really hard work. And then we've been talking a lot about reviews, that unowned media, forums, and social complaints and regulators and all that sort of thing. So that's another key component. And then the paid media, the stuff that you actually put into the marketplace, should be aligned to this human-centric and AI, readable message, so that you're reinforcing those trust signals, you're promoting the very thing that that you're saying that you're promoting, and that paid media, it can't just be a pie in the sky. It has to be more specific. So all that creates that signal coherence, right? So that you can imagine how much work it is to do that. Again, it's this cross-functional, cross-organizational set of activities that I think a lot of organizations aren't really set up for today. And then making sure that all that comes together for the best outcomes, because the outcomes that can be seen in the market are some of the strongest trust signals that can be picked up both by humans and the AI.
One thing I'd add to what Aaron just said is I think more and more for AI, it's not about the volume of your media. It is about the coherence and the clarity of your media. That I would take any day over volume when it comes to an AI advised purchase process.
So, I think we're kind of wrapping things up here. There's some key ideas that are important to remember. One, that those segments matter, right? We spend a lot of time talking about how do we create relevance in the broad market? How do we create relevance for sort of the generic human and the generic AI solution? But more importantly, it's crafting them for segments, because segments are going to be even more important, and it's both segments and context. So if you think about it, just to make a really clear comparison, the old model is big brand claims, a little bit of one size fits all, and I love this phrase, ambition over evidence. But today, you absolutely have to deliver that experience. You have to, when you make promises, it have to be backed up by proof, and you really want to think about how it's going to fit those segments, because AI is going to tailor its response to that context and those segments. And the more specific you can be for that context, the more likely you are to show up, the more likely you are to influence that customer outcome, just like, Shiv's opening story.
Great. And we are wrapping up here. So just a large takeaway. What should leaders do next? I think the evidence we've provided, and the evidence you'll be able to see on your own, if you just do a little bit of search, is you'll find that this is a trend that is not going away. In fact, as more and more of us, even on a personal level, start to engage with our preferred AI tools and AI agents, we recognize that they are starting to learn a lot about us as consumers and individuals. So this is not a trend that we can't ignore. I think there is an urgency to this. It's not a crisis, but it is an urgency. So for the next 90 days, we'd recommend that marketing leaders really think about that 6-step process that we talked about, which is audit your signals. What are you known for today? What are you trying to get known for? And then what can you actually deliver? So that means finding those contradictions. Are there places where you overpromise significantly and you're actually known for overpromising and under-delivering on those claims? And then work towards, well, how do we improve the credibility of what we say? So how do we provide proof assets and content updates? And underlying all of this then is the analytical infrastructure you want, because remember, trust and trust metrics are now a new important currency in marketing. After that first 90 days, you'll have a great overview of how you actually stand in the market. And then the next 90 days really should be a focus on redesigning the experience. Both Aaron and I think that customer experience is back on top. it maybe never left. Sometimes it did, it can be argued it has, but nevertheless, it is back as a critical driver because that's where you're going to generate those trust proof points. And that's where AI is going to be looking for in order to make recommendations around your brand. And as a parting thought, this may look like a bear running right at you, right? There's a lot to cover here. There's a lot to think about. But as the old folksy adage is, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the other person outrunning the bear. And so this, I don't think anybody's going to hit perfect anytime soon. It's very hard to do. But to know that your competitive position now depends on your ability to speak to AI and to actually have those proof points is very important. And it is part of that new competitive landscape.
Awesome. And we have time for a few questions. So thank you guys so much. That was awesome. All right, let's get into it. Okay, first question for either of you. It feels like more and more of my customers are getting their answers from AI before they ever land on our site. What does that do to the funnel we've all built everything around?
Oh, yeah. The tools, the way we've thought about that historically about the funnel, it doesn't make the funnel less relevant, but I think it makes it more important for two things. Number one is, as we've been talking about a lot, the consistency, right? Those things that you put in to create the awareness to what you do to actually incentivize the purchase and the loyalty, it's got to flow through. So especially in long buying cycles where you do get to experience the brand over time before you buy, if those things are not aligned, the signals that you're sending throughout, because customers, the moment they sense a disconnect, what are they going to do? They're either going to drop out of the process, or if you're lucky, they'll maybe consult AI or other things in the marketplace to kind of validate their choice. If they're thinking they're on the right track, and then they get far enough down and there's an inconsistency, well, they might want to validate that. And if that is valid, if their view of that inconsistency is validated through the AI, I think you're in trouble there. So it's more important than ever to make sure, there's that consistency. And that, I'm going to hit this home again because it's just hard to do in big organizations. It has to be across, and it can't just be the funnel. It has to be the entire experience itself. And that requires everybody to get in a room and to understand and have an honest view of what that experience is, and how do they hand it off between sales and marketing and service and product and all of those other components. So I would argue that the funnel is even more important today than it was, and we need to be very careful about how we orchestrate that funnel.
Awesome. I love that. And then we have a question from Jeff. He asks, is there a mechanism or process that allows a brand to send their trust signals to the important AI platforms as opposed to needing the AI platforms to find it? Any thoughts on how that could work? Great question.
Want me to get that, Aaron?
Sure.
Yeah. So today there isn't a way for you to advertise. Now, obviously, these platforms, these AI platforms, are run by companies that eventually do want advertising dollars potentially, right? So there is a potential for that to become available as a way for AI agents to help you guide. But then they have to be very careful because the value of the AI agent decreases if all of a sudden there's a recognition in the market that there's undue influence on the AI recommendation based on a profit motive. And so it will be a tight balance. What I would say is I wouldn't worry too much about that. AI will find you. It has strong capabilities to search wide and broad to get to the answer. What you want, again, is clarity. So on your own assets, have clarity. On your owned assets, find ways to influence the unowned assets, because if you're known for something, the unowned assets, the reviews, the articles, they will focus in around that as well. So brand messaging will still matter. You still direct others to perceive you in a certain way and pass judgment on you in a certain way. And that's very helpful. That's directive. And then that becomes consistent with what you're saying about yourself. It becomes helpful. So Great question, Jeff. I don't have an immediate answer because it's still evolving, but nevertheless, I think I wouldn't worry too much about it. AI will find you.
Awesome. Love that, Shiv. And then I think we have time for one more. So let's see. Okay. When you talk to other marketing leaders, what's the thing they most often get wrong about what AI means for their marketing?
Oh man, we run up against this a lot, and Shiv and I work with a lot of marketing leaders, and the pressure is real. Marketers today are expected to deliver results tomorrow, um, and there's a high demand on the marketing teams to produce these results. And executive teams and boards are seeing AI being utilized very broadly, and they're asking themselves, what are you doing, marketing department, to do that? And I think the challenge that marketing departments have is they want that quick answer. They want to solve the tactic. They want to solve those things which are in their immediate control. And so this idea that, oh, well, what can we do to get our data into to AI? What trust signals can we put into the market, regardless of what is actually happening with the customer experience? There's a lot of consider over investment in that first level of the AEO, GEO, and not nearly enough in that broader ecosystem that I think Shiv explained really well about building the infrastructure that's going to allow you to monitor these things, to reduce the disconnects, and then to help your organization align its messaging in a way that's going to resonate with AI and really fuel that probabilistic model. So I think the challenge really is you got to put some time into the tactic, but if you're all tactics all the time and you're not putting enough effort into strategic, it's going to show up in the long term. And those people that can balance today's needs with tomorrow and the longer needs more broadly, I think they're going to be the winners.
You know,
Awesome. I love that.
I'd add two more things to that Aaron talked about. One is a belief that somehow if you master AI, that it's going to solve your product, price, and delivery problems. It won't. Marketing already struggled to do it. Marketing probably had the best chance of doing it before AI. Now you have an intercedent who's actually saying, I hear what you're saying, show me if you're actually delivering. So it's become harder for marketing to cover for the mistakes and the sins of the rest of the organization. So that's one mistake marketers may have. The second issue that marketers may face is this belief that somehow they fight with their AI tool against the AI tool that a consumer brings to the table. And that's not going to work. Fundamentally, the AI tool that a consumer brings in has a much richer understanding of that customer than your platform's AI tool will ever have. And you need to acknowledge that. Where the focus, I think, needs to be is to understand the implications of the AI tools your customers use and not be so heavily focused. I'm not saying zero, but not be so heavily focused on the AI tools your organization is deploying. As far as marketers are concerned, from another perspective, operations and so forth, that doesn't apply. But for marketers, to understand that there's an uncontrolled AI in the process, and that is the one that's owned by the consumer.
Awesome. Thank you both. Those are both great answers. Thank you for everything. And thank you everyone who logged on and spending a bit of your afternoon with us. We really appreciate it, especially it being our first one. We really appreciate you all joining on. And be sure to look out. The recording will be sent out to everyone. So if anyone wants to send this out to their friends or family or anyone in their network that they think might find this valuable, that'd be super helpful. I have a bit of a spiel. Give me 1 second. And if you take one thing with you, let it be this: AI is changing how customers find and judge brands. And that means it's time to think differently about what your brand stands for and how it shows up. Thank you all for spending your afternoon with us. Take care, and we will see you all next time. So thank you so much. And thank you, Shiv and Aaron. You guys were awesome. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
Bye.
Cheers.